Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing a preview of update 7.8. It's now here in the Blitzhanger. They have the preview set up here. So I'm going to be going just through all the buffs, nerfs, changes, and whatever. Don't expect too much this update because we just have the massive update 7.7. I'm also expecting update 7.9 not to be too much because usually 8, when they switch the number, is a massive update. They usually have, graphical updates, maybe tanks also. It's always the biggest update of the year. So don't expect much from the next 2 updates. Really just some buffs and nerfs, and that's about it. But what we got here on update 7.8, we have an Object 260 nerf. They're nerfing the dispersion on the tank. That's it, just a little bit of a dispersion nerf. It's nothing massive, so I don't think it will be affecting really anything too much. So honestly, there's not much to go over right there. And then we have a 121B buff, which is a good thing. The 121B is not the best of tanks, especially for a premium. At tier 10, they're giving it a dispersion buff and a traverse buff. Quite a good traverse buff, by the way, there. I mean, that's a pretty decent one. Here we do have a Panther 2 buff, and I'm excited for this. I like the Panther 2. I think it's underrated. But also here, this is a nice 5mm on your AP and your APCR. I think that's the stock gun. That's the stock gun, though, so never mind. Kind of useless. The Indian Panzer here, we do have another stock gun buff here, another 5mm. I mean, another stock gun buff here on the VK. These are kind of useless, to be honest, because it's a stock gun. But anyway, so we just have a few stock gun buffs right there. I guess we'll make grinding a little easier. So now we have the Kanonen Jagdpanzer, and it is getting a massive nerf to this tank. I mean, this is a big nerf. I mean, look at this reload. It is going up almost 2 seconds. I mean, that's a lot. I think they should have only gone up 1. I did think the reload was too fast. It did seem kind of overpowered, but that just seems like too much. I mean, look at that DPM. It's going from 3K, I mean, good DPM, to 2.4, which is not really that good for the type of tank this is. So I hope they buff this back, to be honest. When the tank comes out, it might underperform. We'll have to see. But I think that's a little bit overboard. Maybe if they just went to like a flat 8 or something on the reload, that would be a lot better. Maybe a 7.6 or 7.5, something like that I think would be better. So we do have another Panther. This thing is the stock gun again, getting the same buff as all the other ones. The VK 30.02D getting a slight penetration buff. This is on the top gun though, so it will actually be useful. Panther M10 here is getting an engine power buff and a effective power to weight ratio buff. This is very nice. This tank could use some love. It hasn't been the best of tanks for a while now, and yeah, that's definitely a good buff there for the mobility. Next up, we have another stock gun buff to the Tiger 1. Another one, it's the same buff, same for the Tiger P. It's honestly, it's nothing. I mean, it's kind of useless. VK 45.003, of course, this is a not very good tank at tier 7. It's basically just a Tiger, but way worse. I mean, your gun is worse, your mobility is worse, or it might be actually a little better, but your armor is just way worse. So definitely this is a good buff here. We get an engine power buff and an effective power to weight ratio buff, very similar to the to the Panther M10 buff, which, fantastic buff there. That definitely is needed. And then we have a Chai 2 SPG, which is getting as well a mobility buff on both the engine power and effective power to weight ratio and the traverse speed. Nice buff for mobility on the Chai 2. Honestly, don't think it needs it. I still think this tank is kind of broken, to be honest. That's my opinion, though, but guess it was moving a little slow. M4A3E2 is getting a reload buff here. This is the tier 6, the website jump. Getting the buff to the reload. This is the Jumbo, I think. I know a lot of people love this tank. I don't have it. I kind of want to get it, but nice reload buff there. Nothing too big. Also, a very nice dispersion buff, actually. Ooh, that's pretty good. And then a traverse speed buff as well. M6, and this is kind of a controversial one. The M6 nerf. I mean, engine power is dropping like a rock on this thing. It's going to be much, much slower, and of course they did this to make the Magnus look better. The Magnus is hardly better than the M6, maybe even worse, actually, statistically. So, yeah, this is an indirect buff to the Magnus by power creeping the M6, by nerfing it. So yeah, I don't agree with this. I don't think they should nerf this. Maybe just make the Magnus a little better. You know, if you're going to do something, don't nerf the Tech Tree version just to make a premium be better. I don't agree with that. I don't think they really should have done it. I mean, that's a pretty big mobility nerf right there. Now we get to a Hellcat, just 6 more ammo. Actually, that's good, though, because you can run out of ammo. That doesn't have the most of ammos. T-3485 Victory is getting a penetration buff, very tiny buff right there. That really is just, it's useless. T-150 is getting a pretty nice base aim time buff right there, as you can see. That's pretty nice. Many people don't have the tank, though, so it's not going to really affect very many people. Now we do have a VK 30.01P buff. Traverse speed is getting a buff, and the penetration is getting a buff. This is on the Top Gun, though, so it will actually be useful. VK 30.01D. Man, there's so many buffs. If you can't tell, this is a lot of buffs to all the Tier 6s. Tier 6 is kind of getting a buff right now. VK 30.01D, getting a reload buff there, dropping a little bit of the reload. I think that's good. When I played that tank, I felt like it had too long of a reload. I did like it, though. I enjoyed the tank. VK 36.01 is getting a penetration buff on the Top Gun. Tiger 131 and Icebreaker are both getting buffs as well. Tiger 131 is getting, looks like a DPM buff and a penetration buff on the tank. The Icebreaker is getting a reload buff. Very slight one there, just 0.10 seconds there, so very small buff. Then we are getting a Nashorn mobility buff up to 50. I think that's good. Should be mobile since it has no armor. Chrome will be getting a slight base aim time buff. AC4 Sentinel getting a reload buff right there, about 0.09 seconds. Churchill is getting a dispersion nerf on the tank right there. So very small one, though. And then a dispersion factor, and then a traverse speed buff on the tank, though. Honestly, that's more of a buff than a nerf. Giving a heavy tank that slow that gets circled a lot, a traverse buff is definitely much more... it's definitely a lot better than just nerfing a little bit of dispersion. It's definitely going to come out better this update. Churchill Mark IV is getting a engine power buff and an effective power to weight ratio buff. Churchill Gun Carrier is getting an engine power buff as well. And then the Chai 2 getting an engine power buff as well. Man, they are really buffing the mobility on the Tier 6s. Tiger Kuramori SP is getting a penetration buff and a DPM buff. Y5 Firefly is getting a traverse speed buff. I mean, you can read these here. It's just a lot of buffs. I'm not really going to go over any of these small ones. I mean, Sherman, aim time buff, dispersion, Ram 2, penetration. You know, I mean, these are all just so many buffs here, small ones. So I'll skip down here. You can pause the video and look at these if you want, or you can head over to Blitzinger yourself and look at all these buffs and nerfs. I do recommend doing that as well if you want to look more in depth by yourself. So T1 Heavy, though, I am going to talk about this one. They are getting an HP buff, but a pretty big engine power buff and traverse speed. Nerf, sorry, and it traverse speed enough. What am I saying? Okay, nerf. So yeah, I would say this is a big nerf on the mobility of the T1 Heavy, which is a very overpowered Tier 5, so it does need it, but there goes all the seal clubbing in the T1 Heavy. It'll still be OP, though. KV-1 is getting an HP buff and a aiming buff there on the dispersion. Man, that tank has bad dispersion. It's a good thing they're buffing it some. Su-85 is getting a base aim time buff. Panzer 4G is getting a base aim time buff. The Krupp 38D is getting a speed buff. T-25 getting a accuracy buff. And as you can see, there's just so many buffs right here. So I'll skip down to here, a more important one, which is the Crusader. It is getting an auto loader with HE protection is what it says. Autoloader is getting a burst damage of 180 damage. It is dropping some on the DPM, but it is getting that autoloader. And let's see here. What is the reload? Does it say the reload? It's got a speed buff, though. Oh, wait, 7.19 seconds. So basically, it'll be like a Tier 5 Convenator. If you know what the Convenator is, that came out in the Battle Pass a few months ago. It'll be basically turned into that tank. I think it'll be cool, but I really liked how the Crusader was before. I'll have to try that out, though. Sherman 5 getting a buff. As you can see, just more buffs here. I mean, you can pause the video, like I said, if you want, but there's just so many buffs and nerfs right here. Now we have some armor nerfs and buffs right here. So let's look at this. Object 260 is getting, what do we have here? Looks like an armor nerf on the front plate. So I guess the armor was... Actually, wait. Whoa, why are they nerfing it? It was bad before. Well, that's interesting. The Object 260 is going to be even worse now. Then what do we have here on the... okay, we have a gun mantlet fix here on the Super Conqueror. If you can see that right where my cursor is. They're just kind of fixing the gun mantlet right there. Makes sense. WZ-131 is getting a buff, looks like, to the side of the turret, which is good. Does have very weak turret sides. And a lower plate and side buff as well. So, pretty nice armor buff there on the 113. Tiger 131 is getting a nice gun mantlet buff right there, as you can see. Very nice there. And then the Tiger Kuromori Mine as well is getting a slight armor buff. Can't really see where it is, though, to be honest, on this thing. So yeah, I don't know where it's getting a buff, but it's getting a buff. It might be the manlet or something that you can't see. But yeah, honestly, can't see where the buff on that tank is going. But yeah, that is everything in Update 7.8. Kind of a long video, I know, but there were tons of buffs and nerfs to go over. I hope you guys did enjoy it, though, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.